I'm curious about your journey. You talked about, you know, I know you said you were a veteran. You talked about, your path not being kind of the normal path, and I'd love to hear that journey. Use this as a story for others to say, there are ways to get into this world that are not the traditional. I'm going to go to college, right?
Yeah.
So please share that with me.
So, how far back in time do we want to go?
Well, you told
So,
us you were five fixing
yeah.
TV,
So
so
I was always, like I said, I always had that curious mindset, which I feel is a great asset to have. Not necessarily a mandatory one, but a great asset to have in this field, especially pen testing. Um, and then as I got to high school, I started being interested in other things like girls and and sports and other things like that. And then honestly, there weren't too many places for tech. I think the most technical class I ever took was like a graphic arts class. And then I moved into like media. So I did like the video camera and editing and stuff like that. And then when I went into the military, I asked if there was stuff in tech, but they convinced me to go into aircraft maintenance. So I became a F-16 crew chief or flight aircraft mechanic, and then eventually moved to the stealth, the F-117. So basically, I stumbled into tech because I came home and there aren't any fighter jets in the civilian world. And half the time, any interviews that I did have for any aircraft places, they wanted to know about the stealth, which I had a security clearance, so I'm not allowed to talk about. So I tried my hand at a bunch of different things. I did trade work. I worked as an electrician, fell off of a ladder, got up, realized I can walk, and walked off the job site because it wasn't safe. Um, and then I think the last thing for me was I was at another shop, and you needed to be registered as an apprentice. And I remember asking the the manager uh, to register me. At this point, I've been there for 2 years, and he looked at me and said, "Well, why would I do that when I can continue paying you? I think it's like $9 an hour. If I register you, I'm gonna have to, increase your pay gradually. Why would I do that?" So that was the last time I felt like I needed someone. I had to have someone dictate my career progression. And I remember coming home feeling lost, and my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, but she basically, put her foot in my behind and was like, what is it that you really enjoy? And I said, well, I felt like I wanted to do tech all these years, and I just felt like it was a missed opportunity. And she was like, well, go do it. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to go to college. I didn't want to incur any more debt. And she was like, well, figure it out. And that's how I learned about certifications. And and from there, I literally just I worked on getting certifications. I didn't actually I had a computer, but it wasn't like a really good functioning computer. So when I was studying for the A+, I was actually working as a fire dog technician at Circuit City. Now we're going back there. And I was already their home theater tech, but when there was someone who quit on the PC bench, and I went to the manager and said, well, instead of bringing someone else in, give me a couple more bucks and I'll work. I looked at it as great, as more overtime, whatever. I practically lived at the store anyway. So it was like, I might as well get paid for it. And that's how I studied for my A+ certification. Like literally I had the book as I'm opening up computers and looking at the motherboard and the CMOS batteries and the RAM. And then after they went out of business, I worked at a bunch of different places part-time. I landed a job at a call center for like a ISP. So that's how I learned networking and network troubleshooting, and just kind of worked my way up from there, man. Is like I worked a couple other companies, and then I worked at a school system for like 4 or 5 years. And that's where I was introduced to cybersecurity, because we kept getting hit with ransomware like every year. We got hit with ransomware. We were DDoS like every day for like 15-20 minutes at a time for like 6 months. It was just crazy. And then I started to kind of really want to try to figure out why this kept happening. And started looking at doing the vulnerability assessments. And then that's what led me to pen testing. And then from there, it was just like, this is where I want to be. And it just kind of took off from there. And a lot of self-teaching, a lot of creating my own lab environments, and I wasn't even looking at videos on YouTube. It was literally like buying the books I can find and just reading up on it, and just gradually moving on from there. And now here we are in 2022. So this is what, 16 years later. It's almost, actually might be even more than that, but yeah. And here I am now.
A little bit more gray in our beards, but
Yeah.
now this is awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna hit